2 million years ago, a human ancestor is walking under the African sun. It has no shirt, no fur either. Its skin is bare, completely exposed to the heat, and it is fine, more than fine. It is built for this exact moment. Now picture a different scene. A human standing in the snow. Same bare skin, no fur, no clothes. This one is not fine. This one has maybe an hour before its body starts shutting down. Something happened between those two moments. Something huge. And here's the part almost nobody gets right. The answer probably has nothing to do with staying warm, at least not at first. Let's start with the naked part, because on its own, that's already strange. Almost every mammal on Earth wears fur. Thick, full body, built-in insulation. Humans don't. We lost ours. Not overnight, but over hundreds of thousands of years. Evolution slowly stripped the fur off our bodies. Why would evolution do that? Why remove your own natural jacket? Here's the answer. Our ancestors weren't ambush hunters. They were endurance hunters. They didn't rely on speed. They relied on chasing an animal for hours, sometimes an entire day, until it collapsed from exhaustion in the heat. But fur traps heat, and a body that overheats during a long chase is a body that collapses first. So the fur had to go. Losing it let sweat glands do their job. Sweat could evaporate straight off bare skin, and that evaporation kept the body cool enough to keep running. That's a genius survival upgrade. Running further than the animal you're chasing. Outlasting a prey that's faster than you. But upgrades come with a price. Bare skin under a hot sun is perfect. Bare skin on a cold night is a countdown clock. So here's the obvious guess. Humans lost their fur, felt the cold, and invented clothes right away to fix it. Neat story. Except it's wrong. Or at least, it's missing something big. Because here's the problem. Humans lost their body hair somewhere around 1 million years ago. Maybe earlier. But scientists have a way to figure out when actual clothing showed up. And the number they landed on was nowhere close to 1 million years. It was about 170,000 years ago. Read that gap again. Hairless, bare-skinned, walking around for close to 800,000 years before anyone invented something to cover the body. That is an enormous stretch of time to just be cold and apparently do nothing about it. So what were we waiting for? Here's where the story gets strange. Scientists didn't figure out that date from cave paintings or ancient scraps of fabric. They figured it out from lice. Yes, lice. There are two separate kinds of lice that live specifically on humans. One kind lives in the hair on your head. The other kind lives only in clothing. Clothing lice cannot survive without fabric. They need it to hide in, lay eggs in, live their entire life cycle inside it, which means clothing lice could not have existed before clothing did. No clothes, no home for that species. Simple as that. So researchers compared the DNA of both types of lice. They measured how long ago the two split apart into separate species, and that split lines up almost exactly with 170,000 years ago. In other words, that tiny, weird detail about parasites just handed scientists the actual birth date of clothing, not 1 million years ago, when the fur disappeared. Not right away. A massive, strange gap sits in between those two events. So the real question isn't why did humans invent clothes, it's why did we wait so unbelievably long to do it? Here's the answer, and it's simpler than you'd expect. For most of that time, we simply didn't need to. Early humans were living in Africa, warm climate, long stretches of heat, all year round, for generation after generation. Bare skin in a hot climate isn't a problem, it's actually an advantage. Remember the sweating, the endurance, the long hunts under the sun, so there was no pressure to cover up. Nature had already solved the temperature problem by removing the fur in the first place. The cold simply wasn't the enemy yet, but then the world started changing. Ice ages rolled in and out, and more importantly, humans themselves started moving. They pushed north, out of the warm regions that had always protected them, toward colder land, toward places that stayed freezing for months at a time. And that is exactly where bare skin stopped being an advantage and became a death sentence. This is the moment clothing had to exist. Not because people were mildly uncomfortable on a chilly evening, because without something covering their skin, walking into that colder land simply killed you. Think about what that actually means. Clothing wasn't a lifestyle choice. It wasn't fashion, it wasn't modesty, and it wasn't decoration. It was survival technology, the exact tool that unlocked the rest of the planet for our species. Without it, humans stay trapped in warm regions forever, generation after generation, never spreading past the lands their bodies could already handle. With it, we walk into Europe, into Siberia, into places no bare-skinned primate could ever last a single winter. One invention, and suddenly the entire map opens up. But here's the part that makes this even more interesting. Making real, functional clothing was not simple at all. It's not just wrapping a dead animal's skin around your shoulders and calling it done. Raw hide is stiff. It cracks in the cold. It rots when it gets wet. To turn that hide into something you can actually live in, you need to scrape it clean, soften it somehow, and stitch separate pieces together so it moves with your body instead of fighting against it. And stitching means one very specific thing. You need a needle. Bone needles start appearing in the archaeological record around the exact same era that clothing lice split into their own species. Thin, carefully sharpened, with a tiny hole drilled through one end for thread made from sinew or twisted plant fiber. That is not some random bone lying around a cave. That is engineering. Someone sat down, looked at a dead animal's skin, and solved a real problem. How do I turn this stiff, useless hide into something that fits a human body and keeps it alive through winter? That single tool, one small sharpened needle, might be one of the most underrated inventions in our entire history. Without it, there's no tailored clothing. Without tailored clothing, there's no surviving an ice age winter. Without surviving that winter, there's no spreading across the globe the way our species eventually did. Every jacket, every pair of stitched boots, every warm coat hanging in your closet right now traces back to that one small tool and the person who first figured out how to use it. So next time you put on a jacket, without thinking twice about it, remember what that simple motion actually represents. It's not just fabric on skin. It's the reason your ancestors could walk into places where no naked, hairless primate should have ever been able to survive. We didn't invent clothing because we were cold. We invented it so the cold could never stop us again.